Hello and welcome to part 2 of Make a Game in HTML. In this episode we'll be defining a world for our game as well as add new entities to it. But before we get to work, let's use editing to peek into the future and see where we're going. There's something fishy in the future. So we're now looking at a later point in time of this episode. Not necessarily the end of it, so it's only half a spoiler, but at least this is somewhere where we will eventually get. Okay, back to now. We'll continue where we left off at the end of episode 1. So if you haven't seen it, there's a link in the description that'll take you back to that episode. In that episode, you'll also find a link to the repo with the code from that episode. I've cloned that code into the part 2 folder and npm installed it. So let's see if it runs, shall we? And there you go. Randomly moving Aurelia 2 logo. Aurelia logo. Same as Aurelia 1 and 2. And there it's out of this world. Okay. Project is quite small so far. We've got our main component, the starting component, HTML, TypeScript, and CSS file. And then we've got our entity, which are a class that handles the moving entity. And then we've got 3 helper files, rect, vector, and utilities. And that's about it. We're now going to add a world to this to encompass the entity here so that it doesn't run off screen when the movement takes it there. And we're then going to use some more Aurelia 2 features. So before we start adding more Aurelia 2 features, we're going to do some slight restructuring of the project. We're doing this because I want to keep the Aurelia 2 specific part separate from the general game part, the game logic part. This is in case you would want to use another framework than Aurelia 2 to do the more basic display part, or if you want to just use plain HTML, which you also can without issues. You just have to do some more boilerplate code of yourself. This is also a good separation to have because conceptually we do want to keep our game logic fairly separate, well, completely separate from our display logic. So we're going to do that, have that reflect in the structure of our project or folder structure as well. Now I could call these separate parts basically whatever as long as they're separate. So it could be logic and display, or game and display, or back end, front end, or perhaps or server client, which is what I'm going for. For reasons that will hopefully be clear in later episodes, I'm going to split it like this. And for now, there's not many file that needs to move. I'm going to move everything that's backend or game logic into the server folder. Yes, please. And well, so far I'm going to leave these, even though these are technically client files. Yes. I'm going to leave this, even though technically they're client files, but I'm not going to move them in because our life will be somewhat easier if they are still here, for now at least. Now we've got to build a compile error that we need to rectify here, and that is, I would venture the imports here. Oh, sorry, I need to save. And there you go. So let's just take a look and see that we're still here. Yes, we are. And no, it turned around. But this part leaving here, that's what we want to prevent by adding the world. But we're going to do one more thing before we do that. And we're going to go into my app here, and we're going to open up the CSS. And let's separate that one as well. Close. So what we've got here is our main component, our startup component. And it's defining the entity within a div here. So, and the entity, this entity div will eventually grow, and there will be more of them. So I want to add some structure to this, so that it's more separate from this main HTML file, which is our main file for the app. So what I'm going to do is use an Aurelia feature called custom elements, HTML only custom elements. And this is quite easily achieved, is that I'm going to just create a new file here, which I'm going to save. You can see that in the client. I'm going to call it entity, because that makes sense for me. And notice that this now isn't a naming conflict, because this entity here is in client and the other one is in server. So they're separate, and that's another reason to have these two separate. So now I'm going to take the code from here, cut it out, and paste it in there. And here I'm just going to do entity. And by doing this, and really if I'm separating this into an HTML file, I can now use that as if it was a custom element. That's all it takes. But I also need, in order for this to work, I need to import the file. Where are we? It's in client, entity HTML. There you go. Moving that so that we can see it better. And this now makes it possible for us. It compiles, but we can't see anything. Why can't we see anything? Let's take a look at this, see if anything's happening. Well, the reason we can't see anything is because the styling here needs to be applied in entity. Well, it doesn't need to, but it should. In fact, I'm going to create a new file here. Save it, and it's entity CSS. There you go. Save. This still doesn't put it on the screen here, and I'm going to save that and close it. This still doesn't put it on the screen. Why doesn't it? Let's just verify. Nothing there. And that's because if we look at entity here, we can see that it's working with a property. It's expecting a property called entity that holds a context. This is this property here in my app, but it only exists in my app. It's not transferred into the entity HTML. And entity HTML is its own custom element. So what we need to do is we need a way to say that this is the entity. So we need to bind the property in my app into an entity property in entity HTML. And we do that by doing this here, and then define a bindable called entity in entity HTML. And there you go. Now, before we continue, there's one more thing we want to do. We want to go into the entity, and now this is now on the server. Let's just see if we can put that. Let's do client on the left side and server on the right side. We have actually in this file, the entity TypeScript file, we have two classes. It made sense because they're tightly connected, and we have an interface as well. I like to have the entity specification within the entity. I think the entity class, I think that's fine, but I don't really like having this one here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to separate this into a separate file entity context ts. There. And by saving, we now need to fix the imports here, which are where they are, of course, in there. Is that it? Could be. Yep. And we're here. Okay. Oh, and while we're at it, I have this very annoying thing. I like the fact that you could set whether you should update or create or return a clone of this, so you can get a copy with the added or multiplied values. I'm not too fond of the second call of the same method here, so we're going to refactor this a bit by doing vector into vectory, which would be fun, but it's not correct. If update, then this. Otherwise, we're going to do this clone. So we get a vector, and then we do and this just reads a bit better now, I think. We're doing the same thing here. Same code, same result rather, and somewhat linear code, I think. Let's see if that actually works. And it does. We're good. Okay, cool. Let's move this a bit. Okay, so let's close that one. And now let's take a look at creating the world. So basically what we want is having the entity here within a world. So we can do this. Just do with there you go. That's a bit small. Let's do 500 and 400. Okay, so that's our world. Now, of course, this is nothing but some CSS. So let's borrow that one, and just like we did with entity. Let's see if we can get this working. All right, this CSS only works if we're actually using some kind of extrapolation in here. So if I do this, it should be okay. And there you go. Okay, so we haven't really done anything but paint this out, and there's really no concept of world within our project here. So what we'll need to do now is create that. And the easiest way for us is, I think, to copy entity here due to similarities. Let's see, what do we need? World doesn't have a position, doesn't have a velocity, just has a size and a rect. And let's do entity world. Yeah, that looks. So don't need position, don't need velocity. Update can stay as it is for now. And yeah, that's fine. And don't need this. And then don't need that. In the same way, let's copy this to a new file, world context, paste. This is world. And yeah, sure. Do we need top? Oh well. No, we don't. We don't need top and left. Let's remove that. And let's go in. Yeah, let's get to that. So something that we have here, let's say something that we have here is position, right? Where it tries to create the rect. So what we want to do is that this rect should basically just say it should start at 0, 0 and then contain the full size. Now, so it would be tempting to add a vector here that says 0, 0. But remember that rect has its position in the center. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that the position here is taking the size into account here. So if we do multiply with, this is the same that we did to find half, right? So this should now give us this. And now we go into this and do world text with height. We need to now create the world and draw it. So let's just do this world. Close that. There you go. And then we need to declare this. And import it. Missed something somewhere. World context from world context. Compiled successfully. Cannot read with of undefined. And that is, of course, because I haven't defined it yet. So we did that. We also need to do this world defined and pass it a size 500. Let's do 200. see that it's working. And there it is, a small one. Now let's increase it to 400. Now we've got a world, but it doesn't do anything. It didn't keep the entity in. In order to do that, we need to check for collisions in the entity. So let's do that. Once we've moved the entity, we need to basically check collisions. This, of course, isn't anything we've got, so we need to add it. If this rect left is less than, we want to check the left of the entity towards the left of the world. This world, we don't have the world, but we're going to make sure that we do. And I could pass this in and have it entered into the update and passed down. But we're actually going to do this, that we're going to make sure that all the entities belong to the world. There won't be an entity that's not part of this world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the world in the entity like this. So now the entity will always have a world. This, of course, will mess something up here. And now if it's less than the world here, what we want to do is set that to so that it can pass through. If we pass to the left, and those are negative values, remember, then we want to make sure that we set it so that the edges are the same. And the trick with this is that this is nice, but this doesn't work because I don't yet have a setter for vector. We only have, a setter for rect. We only have getters. So what we need is now we need to be a bit clever, because what we want to do is if we're getting the value, then we want that to be our left border, then we will actually need to move it into the center, because the position is the center, right? So we need to make that change. Same goes if we're doing right, we need to subtract this value. And if we're setting top, which we will eventually do, then the value is, we need to name that. The value is y. That's y. Let's copy this and set the bottom. Here we go, and we need to subtract it so that we're adapting the position to where it's supposed to be. And we know that this failed to compile. We know where that's from. Now also, if we now getting to the end, the border of the world, I'm going to make it bounce by reversing the velocity here. So if we're going to the left like we are here, we have a negative value, and if we set that to a negative of itself, it will be positive, and that's the other way. And now we can do right, and that's the same, but this needs to change. If the right value is outside, and then we get And then we have for top is less than top. There we go. And this is need to be y. So that we're changing that one. And finally, if it's bigger, further down. No, that's not right, but we can fix that. It's not supposed to be supposed to negate it. Not subtract it, but set it to. The other one would zero it out. That would be if we wanted to stop it. There. And now we've got the compile thing is because we're creating, where we're creating entities, we need to pass this world. Is that the only place? No, probably not. Let's see where. There you go. Oh. Okay. Let's not set that. There. That should work, shouldn't it? We've compiled. We can now see that it's okay, so it's bouncing, it's kept inside. So let's just to verify this that it's actually working. Let's not have a random velocity. Let's do $75, $75. $65. And let's skip the random. Nothing happens. There you go. Bounce, 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 bounce. Right. Now that we've made entities a part of the world, we've got a world and we've made entities a part of it, there are some things I want to refactor here since having the entity separate here doesn't really make sense anymore. Also, having just one entity doesn't make sense either. So what I'd like to do is have, I can probably close that. What I'd like to do is have the world have a list of entities. For mine, let's put it there. So that we can have more than one. Need to include that. I also want this to now be a part of the world rather than the main app, the main component. Means I need to include that as well. And now we're in the world, so we don't need to point that out. And now we've created it, but we also want to be able to missing. No. We also want to be able to add it. So that this as two separate steps. So it's possible to create an entity within the world, but not actually have it appear in the world in case we want to make modifications to it, which we do. So that's that. Now let's then go and check. And this is no longer right. It's in world. There you go. And once we've done this, we also need to this world add it, this entity. So now let's not have this at all. The entity here, no need. Let's just make this a variable there instead. That way. There you go. Same goes here. Now this is interesting because now we don't have this entity here, so we can't update it. What we do have, we need to have this code running somewhere, and entities are now stored in the world. So instead, let's remove those, do this world update, delta time, and then have the world's update do call update and not draw, because that belongs in draw, right? So, but we don't have an entity, we have a list of entities. So the same goes here for draw. There you go. Now this won't work, and why won't it? We're seeing the world, but we're not seeing the entity, because we also need, within our update, we need to draw the world. But we're still not seeing the entity, and that's because we changed. We need to make one more change. We turned the entity from the app into a list of entities on the world. So what we need to do is we need to also have that reflect here. And in order to do that, what we want to do is repeat this entity. And luckily, there's an easy way to do that in Aurelia. We'll just use a for of, like is there, so we can do entity of. And that will just repeat it. Go through the list. And now we have the entity bouncing. And the nice part now is that if we just do this, if we go into the app here, there's a, so we can remove this, should remove that. If we take this and just create a new one here, let's do that one with random then. Oh, it's const, can't be const. Now we've got two. And both are bouncing nicely, staying within the confines of the world. Okay, so what can we do with this? Well, let's change that back to a const. And let's move this down and make a private create random entity. Let's do that. Do we want to add it? Maybe it should just create it. Yeah. So let's paste that in. Oh, did I copy paste one line too many? I did. Bad. So let's do okay, so let's add some randomness here. So we want the size to be random as well, but we want that one to be squared. So let's do let's have it start at a random place as well, but it needs to be positive, so it needs to be, I don't know, let's make it easy for ourselves here. Just do 100. Oh wait, that's X, so let's do 400. Somewhere in between these 100 and 300. That'll do for now. That'll return the entity. That means that I can now for and this now results in a bunch of entities. Quite few actually, fewer than I thought. Let's find out why. Well, I think we're going to, this doesn't really make sense to have it this way. So this is unrelated, but I don't like it. So let's change this and then go into, so that we're doing, no need to here you go, we're setting it. Could actually have set it straight away. Position. Size. Oh, size. Yeah, that'll do it. So negative size. Yeah, that's not good. So we have a size. Let's fix this a bit then. What do we want to do? We want to make sure that we don't end up at the end of the world. We want to be within the world with the random. So this is X. So we should have size times. So we want to make sure that it starts at half the size. That's the lowest value. And the highest value is this world width. So it's rect width. Let's do so let's do const half size. There you go. Half size. And chop is the same. And let's see if this works better. There we go. That makes more sense. Should be 11. Yeah. Okay, they're all a bit slow. Let's refresh. Yeah, they're not that quick. Let's fix that. Let's see, we'll increase that a bit. Let's also let's make size matter. So the bigger, the slower. There you go. Let's see what happens now. There you go. That's better. And again. Okay, that's more fun to look at. It would, however, maybe be even more fun if it wasn't just logos that was jumping around. So let's see if we can fix that by going into entity here, and we've got entity context. Let's add an image so that, and then we go into, we need this to have an image. Just do a string. That means we also want to set that not public. And we need to go into the context and add it there as well. Is that something that we do want to transfer? And let's head back here into draw. There we go. By doing that, it should now not work because I'm here. I'm not setting image here. So, not here either. So what I need to do is I need image, something like that. And what image to use? Well, I did scour the net. Well, I Googled it, but I did found some free fish images, of course, fish images. So I thought I'd drag those into here. There's two of them. There's a swimming fish and there is a dark swim. Okay, I made this last one by changing the color from green to red, but still. So we're going to use that instead by setting this to fish swim PNG. Yeah. This, we're just going to keep this as image. There you go. Let's try that and see what happens. Nothing. Because, of course, I also need to add that in the define here. Let's see if that makes a difference. Yay! We have a fish amongst the icons, logos. Okay, so something that's a bit boring here is that the fish is going backwards every now and then. So let's introduce a heading here. And here we can be a bit clever here, because there's we can do a transform trick here. We can scale this in X and then do so if I'm adding a scale, if I scale this with a negative value, it will flip it around. So I'm now going to scale it on 1, which was just keep it as is, or -1, which will flip it around. So I've introduced the heading there. That also needs to be, doesn't need to be in the interface because we're not going to set it, but it needs to be here. Let's set that to 1, and then it doesn't like the type. Okay, so let's not set it to 1 then. And let's remember it's not part of the spec, but we should actually set this in. We should set it anyway. So if this heading, the idea is to do if spec velocity x, well, let's do this velocity, this velocity x is less than 0, then set it to -1, otherwise set it to 1. And the same goes for update here. If this velocity x is -1, actually in this case, yeah, let's do this velocity x equals 1, then let's do this. Let's change this. If this if it isn't 0, this means that if we're standing still, it shouldn't flip, or if we're stopped, it shouldn't flip. It shouldn't flip. Then we're setting heading to math sign. So sign will turn a positive value to 1 and a negative value to -1. -1. Yeah. There you go. And have we transferred it? No, we haven't. So we need to transfer this. It needs to be in context as well. So let's do heading number. I wonder if that's all. Will that be all? Let's see. Oh, seems like the fish have turned around. There you go. Yay. Fish amongst the Aurelia. Ah, maybe this is the one we should bring back to the. Yeah, let's grab this to cut this in, edit this in. So there's something fishy in the future. Something fishy in the future. Yeah, okay, cool. So let's now make all of them let's remove the logo completely. So let's just do dark fish swim. I think it was dark fish swim. Yeah, and they're all turning around. So that's nice as well. I think we're getting pretty close here. Let's refresh, see with some more speed. Okay, so I did actually find something else that I wanted to add graphically. And that's some nice backgrounds. Let's see, where's the assets here? So let's add a subfolder called background. So again, when online, I found another free set of assets. Found backgrounds. Trying that again. There they are. Did they end up in node modules? Oh, never mind. So this is a parallax background, which means that there's a set of images that are supposed to be placed on top of each other, and that will create a background. So we have these, I've got this here. Let's close that off again. So what I'm going to do now is again go into here and within the world have I want to be able to just add a background like that. It doesn't need to do anything else. So I'm going to create another HTML only element here, which in turn is a div containing a set of images, and that would then be asset background 1. Yeah, and 2, 3, 3. There you go. Let's see what happens here. Now we've got this huge big thing here, and they're probably yes, added on top here. So what we'll need to do is add some styling by doing and that means that oh wait, it should be there you go, and absolute and right, and this didn't take because and this is it's a webpack thingy. You need to, since we added the HTML and then the CSS afterwards, doesn't always find the CSS here. So let's see if this is working better. Let's see. There you go. And let's remove that. Oh, that's nice. So we're back to, and we can see that we're kind of not fitting in here. So what we'll do is that we'll go into the CSS here for the world, absolute, and we'll just set overflow hidden. And we'll see. there you go. Fish in the sea or lake or whatever. Refreshing. There's more fish in the sea, but that's for another time. Thank you for sticking with it this far. Hope to see you next time. Please leave a comment. Bye-bye.